Titans have always used the light to destroy whatever enemies stand in their way, but things are different now that we have the Behemoth and the darkness. Now we use our powers to build. But don't get me wrong, the Behemoth is still great at destroying things, and in today's build, we're going to take building and destruction to its limits. Let's get started. In Destiny 2, grenade selection for your build is usually a preference, but for today's setup, the Glacier grenade is mandatory. When thrown after it connects with the surface, it creates a wall of 5 stasis crystals and freezes nearby enemies. The crystals function like an actual wall that can be used for cover, and once they're destroyed, they shatter and damage nearby enemies. With that locked in, I want to boost the effectiveness of the Glacier grenade, so I'll be using the aspect Tectonic Harvest. Destroying stasis crystals creates a small shard that can be picked up to reduce the cooldown of your melee. Now, when I gave the Behemoth a rating in my tier list, I said its melee ability Shiver Strike was bad, because it is. Thankfully, the Howl of the Storm aspect gives your melee a much needed facelift. If you activate your melee ability while sliding, you'll create a wave of stasis energy in front of you that freezes enemies and spawns 4 stasis crystals. Those crystals can be shattered for additional damage, and when they're shattered, because you have Tectonic Harvest equipped, it will create a stasis shard that you can pick up to reduce the cooldown of your melee. With those 2 aspects locked in, now we can turn our attention to fragments, and we have 4 slots for them. First, I'll be slotting Whisper of Fissures to increase the damage and radius of stasis shatter explosions, and Whisper of Shards, which causes shattering a stasis crystal to speed up the cooldown of our grenade for a few seconds. For the final 2 slots, we have Whisper of Chains, which provides damage reduction when near a stasis crystal or a frozen enemy, and finally, Whisper of Torment. Your grenade cooldown is reduced by a fixed amount when you take damage. There's a lot of stuff going on here, but essentially what we've done is turned our Glacier grenade into the most versatile grenade in the game. It can function as cover and damage reduction for defense, crowd control via freezing enemies, and damage if we throw it and destroy the pieces. For the rest of our setup, we've got flexibility, but I've always liked the idea of the Titan filling a tanky support role, so I'll be using the Crest of Alpha Lupi. This exotic causes activating my Barricade class ability to release a pulse of healing for myself and nearby allies. With tier 8 resilience, my Barricade cooldown is only 21 seconds, which means I can heal myself and my teammates a lot. This comes in handy in higher difficulty content. To lean even further into defense, on our chest piece I'll be slotting 2 resistance mods. The last piece to our defensive puzzle is the combat mods, and I'll be using Protective Light. Protective Light consumes all of your charge with light stacks when your health is critical, and provides you with damage reduction for a duration based on the number of stacks consumed. To build those charges, I'll be using Charge Harvester, Taking Charge, Stacks on Stacks, and Supercharged to increase the maximum stacks I can carry from 2 to 4. So, yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on here, but don't worry. We are going to head into the field just like always and spend the next few minutes breaking down the build and the playstyle it creates. Let's get out there. Alright, we are inside the K1 Communion Law sector, and it's time for us to talk through the different components of the build. And we'll start off with the Howl of the Storm. You'll see when we activate our melee while sliding, it will create this structure of stasis crystals that we can break, and shattering them will deal damage to enemies that are close enough. And it will also trigger Tectonic Harvest, so we can pick up those little stasis shards to reduce the cooldown of our melee. So our melee is feeding into itself, and then our grenade is also going to help feed into our melee, because that will also create the pieces from Tectonic Harvest that we can gobble up like Pac-Man and continue looping things together. Now, the thing that you're going to want to keep in mind with this setup is you want to fight near your stasis crystals. You don't want to destroy them all instantly. You want to keep some pieces of that active so that you get the damage reduction against enemies. That's not going to matter a lot in the environment that we're in now, but when we crank up the difficulty, being able to survive just a little bit more, you notice it and you feel the difference. So right now, I don't want to shatter everything. I want to fight near these crystals and get the damage reduction while I chew things down. Every once in a while, I can shoot one of the crystals for the shatter damage to clean up enemies, especially when they start clumping together. And something that's really interesting about the melee abilities, it has a lingering effect because of Whisper of Change. We get that damage reduction. So even if we don't kill 15 enemies with a single activation of it, we are getting the lingering effect of damage reduction from what we have created. So it's all about building and using what we built to provide benefits to us. Now, bows work really well for this setup because they break the stasis crystals in a single shot. Other weapons take more shots, but it's not a huge deal. And something cool that you can do with the Glacier Grenade is you can block bosses from being able to get to you, and they will have to fight their way out of the trap that you've created for them. Now, they will be able to break free, but it's a nice way to crowd control the boss. Even though you can't freeze boss level enemies, you can block them from being able to get to you, and that can buy you some time to retreat, reposition, get somewhere more beneficial for yourself. So, you know, he can't get around that wall. He can't do nothing to me while that wall's up. And then, of course, I can use my normal barricade as well for the same purposes. So I have a lot of defensive tools at my disposal. I can use the Glacier Grenade just for straight up cover, and I can use my normal barricade for cover as well, so I can constantly reposition and give myself defenses wherever I should need them. And one last thing to mention about the setup is that Howl of the Storm can be activated in our super. So we use our light attack while sliding, and that will do the same thing that it does when we are not in the super. And it does pretty solid damage to bosses, because when you spawn a stasis crystal inside of a boss, it shatters automatically, and it does some pretty good burst damage. So we've talked about most of the fundamentals for the Glacier Grenade and the Howl of the Storm, so now we can head into something more challenging to put this through its paces. Alright, now that we're cranking things up, we're going to head into the Exodus Garden to a Legend Lost sector. So we've got to deal with champions, a bunch of modifiers. It's a tough environment, but our build is tougher. One thing I want to say before we get into the meat and potatoes of this Lost sector is I do find this setup to be a little bit more difficult to play than your average Destiny build. And that's because you're going to find yourself pressing more inputs than you normally would. The fact that you have to slide before you activate your melee, that's just an extra bit of work. The Glacier Grenade is a slightly cumbersome grenade to use because you have to place it underneath an enemy's feet if you want them to be frozen by it. So that takes some finesse. If you direct hit an enemy with a Glacier Grenade, you're not going to get the exact effect that you're looking for. So like to freeze that servitor, we got to throw it right underneath his feet, and then now we can deal with all his little minions without them being affected by his barrier. And the servitor is actually distracted by the Glacier Grenade he was trying to destroy it, because he doesn't like those big icy crystals in his way. And now that he's taken care of, we're going to get an Overload Captain spawn. Hello, he's right in my face. Where did he go? I don't know where he went. He scared me. But we've got a bunch of enemies pushing up, and they're trying to get through the glacier. And when they destroy it, they take damage. I know there's something behind me slicing me, but I have to keep fire on the Overload Captain so he doesn't heal. But thankfully, all the resilience I have made it so that those hits weren't super detrimental, and it was only one enemy. If it was more than one enemy, I would have pulled back and tried to reposition. Alright, we're going to have some explodey boys coming out of there. We're going to put up the glacier and then pop it to blow them up. And then we'll spawn some more to freeze those guys and pop that as well for some big damage. And then we can harvest all of our stasis shards. We're like a little farmer right now, just picking stuff up to get our cooldowns back. But now we've got to be serious again because there is another Overload Captain on the field. So if he teleports towards me, I'm going to stun him. But I don't think he wants this. Alright, let's just deal with that servitor in the back. Yep, here he comes. I think I can get one more shot. There we go. Perfect. Let's reload that just in case I forget. And we're going to do the same thing that we did before, only this time I'll use the melee to freeze the servitor. Let's freeze some of those guys as well. I want to deal with this boy. The barrier servitor is unfrozen, I think. Yeah, it is. I'm going to have to kind of retreat. And I think I hear exploders coming out. Uh-oh. Popped that barricade for the heal. We are sheltered by the void, which means we have some extra damage reduction while we're critical. Defense. And things got a little dicey for a second, but that's okay. We've got our super now, so I think I'm going to use it. There we go. Made short work of the barrier servitor once we had our super. And we get all the damage resistances from the glaciers that we create with our super. And we can also use the Crest of Alpha Loopy while our super is active. So if we do desperately need a heal, we can trigger it that way. But we're already at the final boss. And I'm going to take him out by putting down my Glacier Grenade. And I'm just going to fight from behind it for the extra resistances. And I'll use it as cover as well. Boss is down. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. So that felt good. It got a little rocky in the middle there. That final section with the barrier servitor and the overload captain at the same time can be tricky, but we survived. We had all the healing that we needed. We had the damage resistances as well, and it allowed us to make it out without breaking too much of a sweat. To wrap things up, we're going to let some gameplay run of the Perdition Legend Lost sector on Europa. This was a very smooth run. There are, without question, faster ways to run through the Perdition Lost sector. My personal best in this environment was about 2 minutes and 45 seconds, and obviously this run took longer than that, but it did represent a good showcase of the safety and the versatility of this build. We got a lot of usage of our Glacier Grenade offensively and defensively for cover, for the damage reduction. It's a blast, and I absolutely enjoy using this setup across all difficulties of the game. The one thing I will say about the Glacier Grenade that is very important, don't throw it in front of your allies to block their path, and be conscious of where you're putting your glaciers when you are in a team situation, because people will probably get annoyed if you keep throwing glaciers in front of them, and the same thing goes for the barricade. It is understandable that you want to constantly heal your allies, but they're not always going to be ready for a barricade to appear directly in front of them. So if you do see an ally that's in need of healing, you can potentially put the barricade behind them so it doesn't block their shots. Maybe they're using a rocket launcher. You don't want to spawn that thing in front of them and have them take a bunch of damage. So that's something else to be conscious of as well. Now, if you want to be a troll and you want to mess around with your friends and blow them up, that's fine. But if you're just playing with random people, do be conscious of where you put your Glacier Grenades. Don't block people's shots. One more thing to consider about the Glacier Grenade is that you can use that in tandem with an explosive weapon like a rocket launcher or grenade launcher for pretty devastating effects. If you can place the Glacier next to an enemy and then fire some rockets at it, the rocket will shatter the crystals and the damage output is pretty insane. So that's something you can consider doing, but you also have to be careful about the placement because the crystals will block damage if they are obstructing the target completely. So if you throw a glacier in front of a target and then shoot the crystal, that's actually going to block damage behind it. So you're going to want to be very conscious of the positioning of those glacier grenades. And with enough practice, it's going to feel like second nature, and you're never going to doubt where you're putting those things, and you're going to have a great time blowing everything up. With all that said, we are going to wrap things up here, so as always, if you enjoyed this video and you'd like to support the channel more than you already do just by watching, liking, subscribing, and commenting, you can head over to patreon.com/iBluairJgR to become a patron. Patrons gain access to bonus videos where I talk about the creative process and the editing process for making these videos. So, as always, the name of the game is Destiny 2, the name of the channel is iBluairJgR. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.